Grateful day everyone, I am Kent Herbie Pasinag from Best Ed Science. So my part, I will going to share to you the first two questions out from 4 questions in grading proposed by Miss Marinila D. Sevenicki in 2007, and we will going to know her opinion for it. Probably we can use it in our teaching practice. So for question number 1, should grades reflect absolute achievement level or achievement relative to others in the same class? In her opinion, this is often referred to as the controversy between norm reference versus criterion reference grading. In norm reference grading system, the letter grade a student receives is based on his or her standing in class. A certain percentage of those at the top receives A's, a specified percent of the next highest grades receives B's, and so on. Thus, an outside person looking at the grades can decide which students in that group perform best under those circumstances. Such a system also takes into account circumstances beyond the student's control which might adversely affect grades, such as poor teaching, bad test, or unexpected problem arising for the entire class. Presumably, this would affect all the students equally, so all performances would drop but the relative standing would stay the same. It also assumes sufficient variability among student performances that the differences in learning between them justifies giving different grades. While in criterion reference system, the instructor sets a standard of performance against which the student's actual performance is measured. All students achieving a given level receives the grades assigned to the level regardless of how many in the class receives the same grades. An outside evaluator looking at the grade knows only that the students has reached a certain level of sets of objectives. The usefulness of that information to the outsider will depend on how much information he or she is given on what behavior is represented by that grade. The grade, however, will always mean the same thing and will not vary from class to class. A possible problem with this is that outside factors such as those discussed under norm reference grading might influence the entire class and performance may drop. In such a case, all students would receive lower grades unless the instructor may make special allowances for circumstances. Second problem is that criterion reference grading does not provide selection information. There is no way to tell from the grading who the best students are. Only that certain students have achieved certain levels. Whether one views this is a positive or negative, well, depend on one's individual philosophy. But an advantage of this system is that the criteria for various grades are known from the beginning. This allows the student to take some responsibility for the level at which he or she is going to perform. Although this might result in some students working below their potential, it usually inspires students to work for a high grade. The instructor is then faced with a dilemma of a lot of students receiving high grades. Some people view this as a problem. And in my opinion, I agree with her points that there are only certain instances where we could use norm reference and criterion reference grading system, but we could also use both grading system to reflect both the student's individual performance and within a group. First would be the individual's absolute achievement level with the use of norm reference grading system so that the student may know his or her level of understanding, and the criterion reference grading in assessing his or her level based on the same class. So I believe these two grading system could be applied depending on what the teacher would want to assess or depending on the educational philosophy of the teacher. So for question number 2, should grades reflect achievement only or non-academic components such as attitude, speed, and diligence? In her opinion, it is a very common practice to incorporate such things as turning in assignments on time into an overall grade in a course, primarily because the need to motivate students to get their work done is a real problem for instructors. Also, it may be appropriate to the selection function of grading that such values of timelessness and diligence be reflected in the grades. External users of the grades may be interpreting the mark to include such factors such as attitude and compliance in addition to competence in the material. The primary problem with such inclusion is that it makes grades even more ambiguous than they already are. It is very difficult to assess these nebulous traits accurately or consistently. Instructor must use real caution when incorporating such value judgment into final grade assignments. Two-step instructors should take are: first, to make student aware of his possibility well in advance of grades assignments, and number two, to make clear that behavior is included in such qualities as prompt completion of work and neatness or completeness. And in my opinion, I agree with her points that grades should reflect both academic and non-academic components, because even though non-academic components are hard to measure, if the teacher could incorporate a fixed criteria for the students to follow, then they would gain the discipline to act well as would reflect on their achievement. As to what was discussed, it is mostly incorporated to such thing as turning in assignments in time into the overall grade in a course, as it would affect the motivation of the students to get their work done early on time. However, it is also vital that non-academic components such as attitude, speed, and diligence may be reflected in the students' grades, provided that they are informed in advance and that these qualities should be well understood. That's all for my part. Thank you.